Hello, good morning and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyenine. More than half of Ghanaians, say the level of corruption in the country has increased and government is doing a poor job in fighting it. The approval ratings for government's anti-corruption efforts have declined sharply since 2017, after more than doubling in the previous 3 years. Afrobarometer, you spoke to, you said that most Ghanaians, most of you, perceive at least some corruption in key public institutions, and that the majority of you fear retaliation if you reported graft to the authorities. Ghana ranks 78th out of 180 countries on Transparency International 2018 Corruption Perception Index, 3 places below its 2017 position. What exactly is going on? After we set up the OSP, after we pass the Right to Information law, we'll seek the answers here on Newsfile. And which law is it that the president broke or violated when he announced the abortion of the 17 December referendum to vote yes or no? Why are you disappointed that you were never given the opportunity to vote yes or no? We'll deal with these vexed matters right after this break. Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Time check is about 13 minutes after 9 o'clock. And here is my take. And I do part 2 of Books Win Corruption Fight in Ghana. Let me start by noting that was a great job by all who joined the No campaign. I should be writing about the victory that saves this country and turn of events next week. I shall give you reasons to keep faith with the constitutional ideal by voting for women and persons with disability on December 17. We should be reserving the 30% appointments to the assemblies for women and persons with disabilities. It's been hijacked by political party people. By the way, the evidence is that women are a lot more efficient managing these resources and are not or are less corrupt. This week is dedicated to anti-corruption awareness ahead of the International Anti-Corruption Day on Monday, December 9. This is part 2 of my take on Books Win the Corruption Fight in Ghana. An officer of one of a corruption fighting state institution was lamenting that one of the reasons not much is achieved is because we don't have laws against unexplained wealth acquisition. Another officer of another state anti-graft body at same occasion on Wednesday was asking me to give some attention to Articles 286 and 287 of the Constitution. Article 286 is largely concerned with or requires public officers to declare their assets. It is refreshing to learn that the Attorney General is working to ensure people don't only list their assets, put them in an envelope, seal and deliver to an Auditor General who must not open it, but these will be verified and publicized. Clause 4 then provides that, quote, any property or assets acquired by a public officer after the initial declaration and which is not reasonably attributable to income, gifts, loan, inheritance, or any other reasonable source shall be deemed to have been acquired in contravention of this Constitution, unquote. Simply put, unexplained wealth by a public officer is corrupt conduct that is not condoned by law in Ghana. In Article 287, citizens are expected to lodge complaints of suspicious wealth acquisition by public officers before SHRAJ. The public officer may have to make an admission or prove the source of the acquisition in investigations by SHRAJ. If an officer makes an admission or is found by the investigations to have corruptly acquired the property or asset, SHRAJ has the power, including as found in Article 229, to take steps to confiscate such property or asset for the state before contemplating criminal prosecution if it wishes. 991.2 billion United States dollars is the total of illicit financial outflows from developing countries in 2020, according to Global Financial Integrity Report 2014. This is over 10 times the official development assistance received by these countries. Some $6.6 trillion left these countries illicitly between 2003 and 2012. These illicit flows increased by 9.4% each year in that period, faster than the growth of these economies. 2.7% of global GDP is available for laundering, according to the UNODC. This is how corruption compromises democracy and deeply, gravely hurts the poor. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption has interesting definitions of corruption I invite you to check out. But in my conclusion, I like to say that we have seen that many people in this country, at least 6 in every 10 Ghanaians, are saying that they are afraid of reporting corruption because of some retaliation that may come. That's 61% of Ghanaians. Please, let's be citizens and not spectators. If we want roads, hospitals, schools that won't get washed away or blown away less than a year after they have been constructed at obviously overpriced rates, just blow the whistle. Thank you very much. All together against corruption.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And we start on the note of the Afrobarometer report. That is a very credible report that's been so consistent since 1999. Great. So, where do we go from here? That most of you, most of us Ghanaians, feel or think that corruption, the level somewhat, is worsening, or a lot has worsened a lot over the period. My guests on Newsfile this morning, Abdul Malik Wekubako, Editor-in-Chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, his Director, Advocacy and Policy Engagement, CDD Ghana, Kofi Bento, Senior Vice President of Imani Africa, and Suleiman Abrahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning. Good morning.
Right.
Your viewers.
So let's say this is the anti-corruption edition, of course, in the week that is dedicated to creating awareness about corruption. And on Monday, the International Day Against Corruption will be observed. So, but before we go into this corruption, let's check if there's some corruption in the agriculture sector. Yesterday was Farmers' Day, and I just got a message from a brother who is in the village, Ayimbila Atera. He says that he was voted the best farmer in our district. Congratulations to you. So what do you have to say about Farmers' Day?
It's still relevant, and at least once a year we are reminded that more than 50% of our people are dependent on farming. It also reminds some of us about a number of things, that today we are importing more food than we've ever imported. I was speaking to some people, we were speaking on the cocoa industry. Imani did a very big research on cocoa industry. And I was making the point that of all the things that we've come through as a country, we were a Gold Coast, we know we have timber, etc. It's farming that has made people rich. Cocoa farmers used to be rich. Farmers used to be rich. Today, if you hear cocoa farmer, you expect to see a poor person. Farming used to make people rich. Today, not so much. Too many of our farmers are poor, struggling, semi-literate and aged. And we need to focus on them. If you take what you eat in a day, chances are about 50% of it is imported.
Or more.
Or more. So for those of us who have to analyze a bit, you have a situation where farming still remains important, but we are importing more. The farmers are not getting what they should be getting. We are not feeding a country which has a lot of land, etc. Something is wrong with our agricultural policy. So this occasion, forces us to reflect on some of those things. I think it comes down to leadership. We must really take a hard look at how we can bring young, educated people into farming.
All right. Thank you very much. And Suleiman, the president has joined the campaign, and he says his wife served him local, rice, and invites everybody to take that example. So that's how we start, right?
Well, I think it's a commendable initiative. I think the campaign has been on for a few weeks now. And I must say that as a son of peasant farmers, both my father and mother are peasant farmers. I grew up farming. For the better part of my life, I was a farmer.
In your backyard.
And yes, and so I understand what it means when we talk about, agriculture and farming. I think what is sometimes disappointing for me as a farmer and somebody, as somebody who grew out of farming, is the fact that you have governments quite often celebrating when prices are so low. And the question I often ask is, do we think about the farmers who are producing these produce that we say, well, we are doing well today. When you go to places like Afrobarometer, you use plantain to beat people, and governments would celebrate that. And the question is, the people who toil, who sweat to produce that, do we care about them? And I think that it's all about the policies that we have to ensure that, yes, food prices shouldn't be so astronomical, but it shouldn't also be at a level that disadvantage the people who sweat to produce that. So on the occasion of Farmers' Day yesterday, I think that, as Kofi has said, it's a great thing that we must continue to celebrate our farmers, but at the same time, we must also endeavor to put in the right policies that would benefit our farmers.
It's encouraging, isn't it, that we hear government talk about a number of things that it is doing, the planting for food and jobs project, the irrigation programs, dams around the place, and also creating markets within, these rural communities so that they can feed industries with the produce that is within the area. Their Confit, juice factory is one of that. The president just inaugurated the multi-purpose dam in Polugu. So we're on the right track, or we are too used to these things? They never amount to much.
Well, good morning, Samson, and let me first of all use the opportunity to pay tribute to one of our colleagues who passed yesterday, Mr. Kofi Okansi-Blanson, a real true patriot, somebody who has inspired all of us to aspire to the new Ghana that we want. And I think that that's the legacy he left us, and we would do our best to continue to fight for that Ghana.
I'm actually waiting for us to finish, and then we'll make a comment about that. Of course, not he alone, and also Ayuba of the Electoral Commission, solid communicator.
May their soul rest in peace.
Right. The reason I'm in black.
Yeah. On the Farmers' Day, I think we can do a lot with the Farmers' Day. There's a lot happening in the agric sector. If you recall some years ago when Mr. Bartels announced the policy where they were trying to get MPs and so on to go, the government was going to procure land banks and so on for kind of, let's say, political elites and other elites to get into farm, because we have been trying hard to move the agriculture from, its subsistence level to more commercial, and I think they had borrowed it from Cote d'Ivoire and so on. That didn't materialize, but the answer had always been if the middle class who have capital could get into agric and commercialize it more, that would improve the lives of peasant farmers as well, and so on. And I think that is beginning to happen, but it's still very much in a very haphazard way. So I know a lot of people in the banking, the services sector, who are using their extra income to do farming. You have a whole cadre of farm managers, young people now. That is a whole new sort of job prospect for people. And if you go to the agri technology side, all of the innovation hubs that you have and so on, there's so many stuff that is happening. I think the Farmers' Day can begin to be used to harness that and tell us about our progress. If, for example, we want to increase local production, or we want to encourage people to eat more locally produced goods, on Farmers' Day, we should know how far we have progressed on that. So the metrics that tracks over the year, how we have been doing on rice, on plantain, on this, on that, and so on. And it's not that it all have to go and be read at the Farmers' Day, but in the run-up to that, all of these kinds of statistics, because we have to find a way to transition.
All right.
And it has to be coordinated, and I think Farmers' Day provides. So I, for example, want to hear an award for agric innovation, young, people who are doing different things.
Okay.
That helps us move us to that transition.
All right.
So I hope that, in the future, maybe we can,
all right. Thank you.
do more of that.
Yes, Kuku?
Need I say more? I'm not too sure.
Okay.
Everything has been said. But one good thing, lasting legacy, I think the PNDC left was this one. Apart from its symbolism, it has a psychological boosting effect. But as has been indicated here, we need to go beyond that.
Right.
Industrialize, modernize agriculture, open up the credit space for them. But this is one good, sustainable legacy, just like the Islamic holidays thing. It reconciles the nation, it boosts our confidence, and brings us together.
We set up an agric development bank, which there are complaints is not exactly developing agric.
I didn't hear you. Can you repeat it?
All right. Okay, so at the end of this program, I have a comment or two to make about those gentlemen who unfortunately passed on yesterday, and I'm sure my guests will also have something to say about them, because they have in no mean way contributed to our public discourse and shaping national, debates. So we start with you, because CDD is the lead organization for Afrobarometer here in Ghana. So 53% say corruption is somewhat or a lot worse. How do we tell that this perception is not wrong perception in the first place?
Well, it's a very important question, and I think also we have to put it in a bigger context. If you track, for example, the Corruption Perception Index that is put out by Transparency International and GII here in Ghana, since it started, and I think probably that goes back to early 2000s or so, we've not hit a 50% mark or 50% score, like a half, pass mark since that time. We've always averagely hovered around for, you know,
40 plus.
For 40 plus, right? That says something about our efforts to fight corruption, because it means that from the public's point of view, the perception or how they perceive corruption has been constant. It's constantly high. All right. Now, the current perception statistics, you have to also put it in context. So if you go back to 2014, which was round 6 of the survey, it was 83% of people who felt corruption had increased, right? And actually, the 2014 was a really poor. I mean, it was one of the worst sort of valuations that we have gotten in the Afrobarometer. Everything, all the indices were very, very poor. And so from 2014, then we had 2017, when the new government had just come in. So we collected that data in September of 2017. So Nana Akufo-Addo's government had just come in. The expectations were very high. There was the promise of the OSP, you know, the promise of if you want to do business, you know, you shouldn't come into my government.
There was a promise that there'll be a lot of savings on corruption.
There was the savings
because projects were overpriced and so on, and there was a lot of corruption. The pronouncements and everything was, you know, and then people were quite optimistic about that. There was actually the refrain that we're not broke because we could get a lot of money from, you know, stop them from the corrupt activities. Let's listen to the research analyst at your end, CDD, Newton Noville, who spoke about this briefly, and then we'll return to Kojo Asante.
We don't push out all the findings from the 100 questions to the public. So we put them into thematic areas. And so somewhere last week or last 2 weeks, there was one on the economic conditions.
So what you're saying that that answer, the results for that will come out?
Will come out.
When?
It will come out.
I want to see it now. I want to see it now.
So that
no, but timing is everything.
Yes.
If you wait till election year and release that, you're in trouble. Because that has a potential of influencing. And the reason why you held on to it, nobody knows. I mean, after tonight that they know that it's there, you'll be getting calls tomorrow.
I can give a teaser, but then...
Give me a teaser.
So the findings does not put any of the political parties in a position to win election. That is 50 plus 1 vote.
But the NDC,
parties,
is ahead, isn't it?
That is a question again that I will not answer.
No, but that is very instructive.
All right, so that's just to tell you that the survey cuts across various aspects of the economy and the Ghanaian society. Part of the survey results show that neither the NPP or the NDC will make a one-touch victory in 2020. Part of the survey also says that the political party vigilantes, because of whom we have had meetings and had fights and had, you know, all sorts of things done, passed a law, are still around. Nothing has happened. Yeah. Okay, that'll be a different research.
It's a different research.
Okay. So
reports,
there are various aspects of the report. Yeah. It is not just about corruption, but in fact, it is focused on corruption.
It's 100 questions.
100 questions.
And it covers everything from social issues. Even the one we released on corruption also has evaluations on public services. Right. How government is doing on various public services.
So you took us to 2014 round 7
on the level of corruption, whether corruption has gotten worse. So 83%, and then it goes down to 39%.
Wow.
So the aspiration of the public that what they were hearing, the kind of moves that were being made, it clearly signaled a period where there's a lot of optimism. It's a drastic drop. And then it goes up to 53%. after a 2-year period. So, I mean, I put that 39% to basically a more aspirational sort of verdict on the new government that had come in, and the current to the more aspirational, the experience having the government sort of undertaking certain initiatives. So it kind of reflects what they have experienced so far under the current government. But for me, as I said, all of it still boils down to the bigger picture, that I think we are struggling to make quite a radical move on tackling corruption. And the fact, so in a way you can feel like it's some sort of a stagnation, right? And we have to ask ourselves some very hard questions. Okay, we know the kind of interventions government have put in place, OSP, the attempt to address procurement, you know, reducing sole sourcing, making restricted tendering, all of those kinds of things. Trying to resource both the investigative and the prosecutorial bodies. How do we measure, you know, if we are dealing with the graft? How are we able to measure our progress?
So what's the story? If in the midst of all these that you are talking about, that the government has tried to do OSP, and I don't forget also the RTI, and then you're talking about several other things.
Yeah.
And yet, in the midst of all of that, it gets this bad.
So RTI, it's not operational until January 2020, but you would expect that that would give people a lift, right? I think you have to look at the OSP as symbolic. So for me, if by now Mr. Amidu's office had even sort of done some prosecution or whatever, it could have affected the way people see government performance in that, you know, in that. Because, and for me, a lot of the corruption is too pervasive. Every weather surveys, both in terms of people experiencing corruption, it's pervasive. Petty corruption, grand corruption, it's a huge problem. But when you have a huge problem like that, you cannot tackle everything. It is really about signaling. You are signaling to people that there is a new type of order. And they have to see it. So one of the things that I've commented on, for example, is police bribery. I don't understand why no government or even IGP has managed to sort of nip this in the bud. It's the first sort of point of call for a lot of citizens when they are interacting with public officials. That is symbolic. If that was reduced, I can anticipate that if you were to do a survey the next time, people would begin to say something about whether they feel corruption is reduced or not. So that lack of signaling is a big problem for me.
And when we talk about corruption from the UN's perspective and a broader look at corruption, we talk about a range of transactions which include extortion, bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, payment of facilitation fees, abuse of discretion, conflict of interest, and so on. There's been a lot of talk about nepotism, for example, in this regime. Could that also have fed into this perception index?
I don't think, because actually all the survey, if you do a survey about what people understand to be corruption, nepotism doesn't fall into it. Even facilitation fees sometimes are not considered as corruption by the public. Most people consider corruption to be bribery, you know, actual exchange of money. And I think in some ways that's probably where the police becomes, you know, a target, or the courts, particularly with services. So, and that itself is an area that we have to work on. But if you and the other GIS surveys have shown, even NCC surveys have shown that very clearly. I think for me is that, you see, people have to feel when you've had a system like we have in terms of people experiencing a lot of extortions of money in the hospital and this and that. What is going to convince them that things have changed? Either those things stop, or they actually see people being prosecuted in a way that sort of they think, oh yeah, this government is really serious. So we've had prosecutions. There's the Opuni prosecution that's on there. There's, I think, Maslot, and then the NCA cases that are going on. One other thing that I think people, once it gets to court, it's also, it gets technical. So people cannot really follow what's going on. But I feel that it's, in terms of signaling, that is another area where you have to be able to project that people are properly being prosecuted. It's one of the reasons why I feel that the Shraj stopping their public hearings around corruption is a bad thing. Because, you see, the public have to see accountability being being pursued. They have to have a way of seeing it. Losing all of those things does not help.
When you said, like, facilitation fees, for example, people don't see that as corruption.
Yes.
And yet, they, particularly when they interface with public service, mostly what they are doing, I thought they understood that to be facilitation fee, that you must bring something so I can do the job for you. And where they even bring in the judiciary and all of these other places, my suspicion is that that is the only thing they would have done to say that is corruption.
Yeah.
So that must be serious enough.
Yeah.
It leads me to ask a question. If 53% say corruption is somewhat or a lot worse today, and yet in the same survey, corruption is not their major concern or the issue that they require to be addressed. They begin talking about roads, infrastructure.
Yeah, education.
Corruption is rather the eighth major problem.
Yeah.
I did a comparison with Spain.
Yeah.
In 2016, they were ranked corruption was ranked the biggest problem. It was behind unemployment in Spain. Now, this was essentially political corruption because corruption among the civil service was said to be low. Spain, were 58th on the Transparency International rankings in 2015. And yet, corruption was seen as the second biggest to be resolved.
No, I don't think you even have to go to Spain to sort of draw analogies because, I mean, as for surveys, when you ask 100 questions, there are so many answers that looks contradictory. I mean, there are techniques to try to reconcile them and understand, like trust ratings. So, do you feel that there is corruption in the presidency and its appointees? You get a certain number. Do you trust the president? Yes. You see it as contradictory. But it could be that people are making a distinction between the president and his appointees. Or that even though they feel that, oh, this is going on, this individual, they still trust him. So it's not too far-fetched. I think that nobody should look at that 8th position and say, oh, corruption is not important. Because, you see, when you ask people...
But that's what the results should be telling us.
No, well, I mean, in terms from a policy point of view.
If you say it's getting worse, a lot worse, and then you make it the 8th of your problems to be resolved.
Well, that's why it's important, I mean, for me as a researcher, when you have all of these questions, there's so many things. Even when you go and do the demographic breakdown, one of the consistent patterns in all of the questions around corruption is that young people are more likely to rate the government poorly. People who are more educated, post-secondary, are likely to rate the government poorly. And people who are poor are more likely to rate the government poorly. So there are patterns, and that's all important for policy policy analysis and response.
Okay.
So for me, you see, what will happen, and we're going to be doing a pre-election survey next year, and I'm sure this matter will come up again, and we'll see where corruption, is rated. But if you ask people about is the connection between corruption and development.
Let me go around and then return, because today we are discussing corruption, Afrobarometer, and the aborted referendum. I suppose that can take a small of our, just a bit of our time when we are closing. And this is the main and most important thing. And to those complaining about the YouTube stream, the show is streaming on the Multi-TV World page on YouTube. So you can watch from there. Thank you very much. So, Kofi, okay, so what do you make of this survey, these results?
They are interesting, but because you've made it the main subject, let's take our time and go around it. We need to note in the first place that perceptions of corruption over time become cultural. People's perceptions have some cultural, roots and links. What they claim perception is or corruption is or what it is not. Now, it's interesting that it came out that facilitation is not seen as corruption.
Not in this survey. I was referring to
A different yes.
surveys that have been done that even.
But it's true here.
Yeah.
And that's where it seeps into our culture. You have a situation now where people see facilitation as helping them. It reflects a total a feeling that the system cannot work unless you have somebody who helps you through it. To that extent, therefore, they see the guy facilitating for which they have to pay as somebody helping them. It's become a cultural phenomenon. So that's one thing, and we need to break that because people need to have some confidence that the system can work, which is why I'm happy with what you're doing with the passport office, etc., where you can see that really things work, DVLA, etc., and we need that in other places. Then here's something else I'd like us to look at, especially in the context of Ghana and what you're doing. There is a marked difference between what offends people and what affects them. And for me, that's the heart of the matter. Are people offended by corruption? Or what we define as corruption? What you just defined as corruption? And does it affect them? I wish to submit that today in this country...
The UN says we should define corruption as misuse of entrusted power for private gain.
Yes.
So that it catches every situation.
Does that offend the average Ghanaian? And I submit that the average Ghanaian is stressed to the point where if the thing does not affect him or her, he doesn't care anymore. People are trying to get by, all right? To that extent, therefore, it may be corruption, and you see that's why the police keep coming up, okay? You get arrested, he is affected by the action of that policeman. But when somebody, we've almost forgotten about Wyoming. When somebody steals $1 million, when somebody does all those things, does it affect him? Again, they feel so distant from that arrangement that they don't feel affected by it, and so they don't care.
That's why they make it the 8th of their biggest headaches.
Exactly.
I think you are.
Okay.
He's understanding me.
Sorry. I asked this same question to H.K.C. Prempe. I put it up, and this was his answer. He says, because too many citizens don't pay direct taxes and don't feel the pinch of taxes on their pockets.
Perfect.
So corruption to them is like other people's money.
Exactly my point. We need to start looking at these things from these points of view. It's become a cultural issue. Look, why is the guy going to struggle about the time it takes for the ministry to turn around and give him some kind of tax clearance, or GRA gives him this or that or that or that? So people have decided these things, Charlie, is other people's money. And the more that happens, the more impunity we will have in those areas. Okay. Another thing you need to note is that today in Ghana, and I realized this, there's a group I belong to, and there was a discussion, and I was telling them that, look, today in Ghana, people care more about performance than they care about corruption. Okay? That's the third thing. What do I mean by that? If you need to build a road from here to the hospital, and the road is going to cost $5 million, what people want is for you to build a road. If you go and charge $10 million for the road, their problem is if you don't build a road. Their problem is not that you charge $10 million for the road.
Their problem is not that you built it today and the rains came yesterday and it's washed away.
They want performance. They want to see the hospital.
No,
so they can
I
go
don't think that is accurate.
No, hold on. I'm telling you.
Because they see the roads and these things and they complain.
No, wait.
Is it not this? They said they were spending so much money and the next day it's gone?
At this point, they want the road. As long as the road is there, they don't care how much it costs. Immediately the potholes start happening on the road, then all those issues come up. Okay. That is the same reason why if Black Stars win, we don't interrogate how much bonus they were paid and who got bonus. Okay? So get the point well. Performance is part of what you're talking about. When people see the road, they are fine. But then if the road starts developing potholes, it's a performance issue.
But Kofi, they are all linked.
Oh, they are linked, but I'm saying...
Because eventually, if you are charging 10 extra, you know, then you won't have money to go and do the road.
You see?
And then the people will...
I am making a distinction between what people consider as affecting them and what all of us will understand. So, for instance, if the $5 million road is built at 10 million, you and I will have a fit over it. But I'm saying the mass of our people care whether there's a road or there's no road.
This survey is a reality for you.
It's a reality because I've seen it for long, and I'm saying that what people respond to in this survey is what affects them. Because not everything offends them anymore. And we need to understand that. Then we can interpret these surveys properly.
Okay.
Now, the fact that... Let me finish on this. Let me finish.
Okay.
The fact that they are not offended by certain aspects of corruption does not mean it is not corruption.
Oh, no,
that's the one that's killing us.
That's also very serious.
That's the one that's killing us.
That people are becoming sort of...
Immune.
You see, I want to...
Because we have become too used to it.
Yes.
And it's happening anyway.
We see things happening, nothing happens to people. So people are like, Charlie, let me get on with my life.
And you know the retaliation part, you know, which you mentioned,
where they say they are afraid.
But just to make Kofi, I agree with you exactly in terms of how this plays out to people. But that is the problem, that if you are on the government side or you are the policy maker, it catches up on you eventually. And that's exactly what happened in 2016. So by the time, when you're having problems with Dumso, you're having, so you are lacking money to do this, and then all of those things start coming back. It's because of the corruption that you couldn't do this, or that's why the road is bad, and so on and so forth. So these things catch up on you. So the public, at a moment in time, as you're right, that these things are so far removed. I remember one of the interventions we tried to do was to show people how much money the medical stores, you know, when you put it in bags, how much money we are talking about, because people can compute.
We're still making excuses to prosecute those who are behind it,
the medical store. So you see, so the point there is that it's now time we start trying to visualize for our people the things that they don't consider important, because that's what ultimately comes back to kill all of us. Okay, but that point must be, and
so that piece of road they are crying for never came, or that school or hospital never happened.
Because somebody stole money somewhere.
That's how it went.
We need to make these connections.
Right.
And then we also need to, we are at the point in this country, we need to move from perception assessments to actually trying to get real evidence. It's time.
But you have real evidence.
Oh, hold on.
Auditor General's report.
We have some real, it's not really real. That's why some of the prosecutions are not happening, or we are not getting the necessary, outcomes or what we are expecting.
But what role do you think, in the midst of all the positives, that should have affected? Because from where I sit, I thought that naturally, the things that had been done on the books, you've seen me do my takes on books win corruption fights. The things that have been done on the books naturally should have contributed to an improved perception, but they have not. How much do you think, these oil, dirty oil sale, these all these corruption things the president was accused of, as it were, whitewashing his people and letting them go, have influence, might have influenced this thing?
Again, so that those of us who dwell in that space understand it, and we're offended by it because we see the connections.
And you guys were doing the Kelly GVG. You still don't let go of that issue.
We don't let go, but honestly, this affected that thing. Because you get to a point where you are wondering, okay, let's get back. Now, people decide that if somebody steals $1 million at Tor, or somebody sells or contaminates fuel at Bust, and that fuel does not come into my car, but they sell it somewhere, they make the money, they split it, they share, and they go. It is corruption, but please, I have kinky and fish issues to deal with. I have bread and not butter, but bread and water issues. My kids' school fees are coming up. So quickly, they jettison those things and move on to them. And that's where now we need to connect, because you see, when the weight of the people is taken off an issue, there is no motivation for those in power to deal with the issue. But then again, you see, why do people have the view that things are getting worse? I think it has to do with expectations. And when I make the point that we now need to move from measuring or assessing perception to going to the real, the president talked about the ANAS principle. The president made a pronouncement publicly that he will use the ANAS principle. Now, we have said ANAS is not perfect, but the effect of ANAS's work, as far as I'm concerned, is more than IOCO and SFO and the special prosecutor put together. And look at how it arrests the nation. That's what one man can do. So if the president said, I will use the ANAS principle, people loved it. And there's a huge disappointment today, because we felt that the ANAS principle brings you graphic evidence, even though it's not processed. It's not been tested in court. It brings you graphic evidence. We've seen zero of that promise. I think that's the kind of thing that will excite people and give a sense that we are doing something to fight corruption.
But why? You also mentioned there are problems with the ANAS methods, some have problems with it and so on. But you have the OSP. He's complaining about what he needs that he doesn't have. You have IOCO, who also need to be better empowered. Since they were put up, we know by the statistics that they have investigated almost 2 million cases. They have recovered a lot of money for the country. And as we speak, why not empower them? As we speak, we understand that the human resource capacity and logistics support is a major challenge to IOCO. For example, they have an establishment ceiling for 832 for the human resource. Out of that, currently they are operating with 374 personnel.
My brother, you can't tell me IOCO is less resource than ANAS.
I'm giving you the statistics.
I know the statistics, but the point is, you can choose to give a series of excuses because you don't have resources. I always say resourcefulness is more important than resources. What is IOCO in the news for right now? They're in the news for fighting AG. They are being accused of doing some whitewash issues. I'm not attacking IOCO. I'm simply saying you are dealing in the area of perception, corruption perception, and we are saying people think the government is not fighting corruption. These are the institutions supposed to be doing the work. You must do it and be seen to be doing it, because that's what governance is, and that's how perception, is formed. And don't think perception means nothing. Perception,
you and I know what goes on in Shraj.
Yes.
At the time I was leading the petition to remove the Shraj boss, that's when I discovered, to my utter shock, that the state had money to pay salaries, but had no money for them to operate. Money for them to operate, to do their normal work, logistics, it didn't have. It had money to pay them their salaries at the end of the month. That's Shraj. That's a giant. That's a monster sitting there. I just referred you to Article 2, 86 and 87. People could make complaints about unexplained wealth, and there's a lot of it in this country, and they will go and get these properties retrieved and monies taken for the state without going through the long process of prosecution. Yet we know Shraj, is financially, these entities are not independent.
I'm so tempted, but I won't go there. See, yes. You see, you have a situation. Well, we need to arrange or re-engineer some of these arrangements, so that what the state decides or what government decides does not affect some of these independent institutions. But again, resources are more important than resourcefulness. One of these institutions, and I have good friends in some of those places, I saw them driving a 5.7-liter V8. And I asked myself, who needs a 5.7-liter V8 riding around Accra? And then the same person comes to tell you that I don't have money to go and do this. You see, there is some room for leadership, to innovate and find a way to do what they have to do. Again, what offends people is different from what affects them. People now look at it and say, people are almost giving up on strike, for instance. And there are some very good people there, some of whom I know. And people are giving up on strike because it feels like nothing will come out of it and they'll still give you an excuse. All right. So back to this corruption thing.
They may have problems, but they are working though.
They do have problems,
if you
and they
don't
are
have
working.
information about what they do,
Yes,
then you may
and that's
think
why
that
they are
for
working,
me, the public
but they need to be
hearings,
seen.
It's important.
The public, I totally agree with you. You see, these independent institutions must appreciate that a lot of what they do has to filter into confidence within the public, within the populace. So you can't hide behind anything and be doing your thing in silence. There must be a certain arrangement around them so that their work will be seen. It will bring people confidence. We haven't used the whistleblowers law.
Okay.
Why? Why? Because people haven't seen it. So such public hearings should be out there. You know, you and I know, people come and sit in court and just listen to things. And some of these things, if you do them publicly, it has a way of making people believe that, oh, something is happening. Then it moves to become something that affects them. So my point is that, well, the perception thing is good, but it's time we need to start getting beyond perception to producing something more like what an NAS principle is likely to produce. Then, and that is not
But
final.
I just told you, the evidence you are looking for is in the Auditor General's report every year.
The Auditor General's report.
And this is an Auditor General, for example, who is mandated to investigate and audit what comes after he comes into office. He goes back to the previous regime and investigate them. And how much did we find?
This Auditor General is
Yes.
the best we've had in the history of this country. It's the same problem I'm talking about. Who reads the Auditor General report apart from those of us here? And I'm talking about when you go into the public to do Afrobarometer and you are dealing with perception, you need to move from what is in the Auditor General's report into something. When a NAS does work, people troop to go and watch. So, you see, I'm saying clearly the results we are getting, the output we are getting, points to something. People have decided that what affects me is different from what offends me.
So-
and if I have to pay money for facilitation,
So very,
please let
very
me do
finally,
it.
and just a minute if you can respond to that. So from what you have clearly admitted, appears to be happening, and in fact is happening. You mentioned the Auditor General and what he has done. In the midst of all of that, if this is what people's perception is of corruption today, that it is worsened, a lot worsened, then it must be that terrible that this government has not kept faith with the people, the promise that it made. It has rather worsened the situation.
So let's be clear. I don't believe that corruption is worse. But I do believe that people are extremely disappointed in this government's fight against corruption.
You don't believe that corruption is worse?
I don't. I don't have any
I
evidence to that
ask you
effect.
whether or not this is reality for you, and you answered in the affirmative.
So-
if it is relative, if it is,
If
it
you
is
give me time,
reality,
I explain. No, but
why then are
it's-
you
so
saying
if you give me time, I
you
explain.
are disagreeing with the majority of Ghanaians?
The majority of Ghanaians are expressing a perception, and I told you that.
A perception informed
Samson,
by their
let me-
encounters.
let me make my point.
Check the report.
Yes.
A perception informed by their encounters
Yes.
with public institutions.
Yes, and I'm telling you that their encounters, the same people telling you that when I pay money to facilitate something done for me, that's not corruption. We need to be clear about these things so that we don't go running off. I'm saying there was a lot of expectation around this government and that it will fight corruption and be robust at it. So far, how many have we seen? It's this president that said we are going to use the ANAS principle. As we speak, ANAS is under attack by members of the same government. Okay, look at what Manasseh has
The
done.
security he had has been removed from him.
Yes. Okay, so I'm saying that I don't have evidence that corruption has increased. We can go into that and look into that. But I clearly understand why people feel that this government has not fulfilled its promise to fight corruption.
Has it just not fulfilled or it has failed?
Well, I wouldn't say it has failed. There's still time. And nothing stops them from going around and using the NAS principle
they've done
and
3
doing some of
years.
the things.
They've
They've
done
done
3
3 years.
years.
So that is disappointing. And I agree that the expectation that we came into this government with has not been met.
Okay.
Example, the NAS principle.
All right, so let's go around. And Sulemana, you, because of what you do in your job, not only for Ghana, but for the sub-region, training journalists to look for, where things are not being done right and report on them. When you read a survey like this one, that includes that 6 in 10 Ghanaians, that's 61%, say they are at a risk of retaliation or other negative consequences if they report incidents of corruption. What does it tell you?
Well, Samson, I think that generally I would say that the findings from the latest Afrobarometer survey in relation to corruption and what we're talking about follows a certain global pattern. If you look at other studies that have been conducted elsewhere, looking at trust for public institutions, perceptions among citizens of public institutions, you realize that across the world, and particularly in Africa, the same institutions are positioned as the Afrobarometer results reveal. We talk about the police, the judiciary, and indeed, somewhere in the Afrobarometer report, it talks about the most trusted, the most trusted being religious leaders, and elsewhere you would find traditional leaders being part of it. And in Ghana, it talks about the army. Let me also say that the results also reveal that people really follow the trends. Because if you look at the differences, over the years, what people think, whether government is doing well, government is not doing well, corruption is decreasing, corruption is increasing, and you look at the varied figures, it shows you that people really follow what is happening. And that is why, as Kojo was saying, when a new government comes in, because the expectations are so high, in terms of whether corruption has increased or reduced, you see so many people saying that it's come down. And in terms of people's perception of whether government is doing well in the fight against corruption, you see it going up. So if you look at some of the figures here, if you look at 1999, for example, which was still President Rawlings, 43% of the people saying, well, the government is doing well not doing well in corruption, versus 57% that says, well, government is doing well. Down to 2014, as Kojo was saying, the worst year, where you have 74% of the people saying we are not satisfied with what government is doing in the fight against corruption, versus 26% that says, well, we think the government is doing well. Now, again, you've related to the 2017-2019 figures, but looking at whether people are satisfied or not satisfied, because the earlier was, is it increasing or decreasing? But in terms of whether people are satisfied or not satisfied, 2017, new government, and it plummeted from 74 to 34% in terms of people who believed that the government was not doing well in the area of corruption. And then from 26% in terms of people who say, well, government is doing well, it came to 67% for 2017. So from 26% of the people saying, oh, the NDC government we think is doing well, 2017, that jumped to 67% of the people. Almost 7 out of 10 people saying, well, we think the MPP government is doing well in the fight against corruption. Then in 2-3 years down the line, that drops from 67 to 40%. And suddenly that is quite worrying. And then, of course, in terms of whether it is increasing or decreasing, you have 36 and now 53. And that is certainly worrying. But you were asking the question, why would people say the government is not doing well in the fight against corruption, and yet corruption doesn't appear to be the priority for them? For me, the answer is, in today's Ghana, the ordinary man knows that politics is about money making. And the way to make money is to cut corners. And indeed, I believe all of us here, friends or families may have told us one day or the other, one time or the other, but why are you not going into politics to also make some of the money and then we'll all benefit? It's a common thing. So the notion among the citizenry when it comes to politics is that politicians go in there to make money, or politics in this country has become a money-making enterprise. And therefore, why would anybody then be surprised if this classroom, 6-classroom block can be built with 100,000 and the price is 300,000? They will tell you, but why? That's normal. Every politician would make money. So the NDC was there. People think they have made their money. The MPP comes in and people say, is the time for the MPP to make it? And indeed, during the 2016 campaign, if you remember, people were saying that when we come to power, you have to take position. Take position to do what? No contribution. No contributions, no chop. Now, so for me, that is... So
the example you just gave got me asking a question too. That we knew that at a point, the MPP in opposition could not fund its conference. It didn't have money. They were looking for, is it 1 million or so? They couldn't find the money to do it. All of a sudden, they were your biggest supporters of the yes votes, where they were going to have to fund a lot more, and they could find the money comfortably. That, for me, would give an impression that must feed into the perception index.
No, certainly. And of course, you know, we witnessed the MPP, you know, resorting to innovative ways of raising money, such as selling scratch cards, so you could find scratch cards that are branded MPP and so on and so forth. I think that as a party, they would continue to need money for elections and for other activities. You ask yourself, why has it,
they don't do that anymore.
Stopped? You know, so like I said,
the NDC might do so soon.
Exactly. As I said, for many people in this country, politics is about money making. So if you are in MPP, you are in power, it's your time. If you are in NDC, you are in power, it's your time. And therefore, people would say, look, forget about the corruption. As Kofi was saying, what would need, you know, would be the roads, the hospitals, and so on and so forth. And for corruption, they are all corrupt, and they do it all the time, provided they get the opportunity. But why would you know, over a 2-year period, Ghanaians who thought that, look, they had confidence in the MPP in terms of the fight against corruption, the government would do so well, and so on and so forth, and just within 2 years, the figures are changing. And for me, I've listed here about 6 or 7 reasons that I think would account for, you know, the dwindling confidence in the government's abilities towards the fight against corruption. One, somebody mentioned Wyoming. Wyoming was a big thing, a big campaign issue. You know, and people had the expectation that, well, one of the things that Ghanaians will benefit from is the retrieval of the Wyoming money once we get the MPP into power. Today, what are we witnessing? It's a fight between Martin Amidu and the AG on the same Wyoming money. The Supreme Court says what? Well, you need to. But the struggle towards retrieving the money, you know, Martin obviously went to court as, you know, as an individual to file against Wyoming. There was judgment that the money must be retrieved. Today, what are we witnessing? Martin must provide whatever to the AG to support the retrieval of the money. In court, what are we witnessing? Literally, the last time, as I read, I'm not a lawyer, I may be wrong, but it was Dame versus Martin. What was it about? I think it was on issues related to still the retrieval of the Wyoming money and whether evidence that was provided by Martin was sufficient to help the AG to retrieve the money or not.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah? So that for me is one thing.
But clearly in that matter, the court or the state is not fighting Martin Amidu.
Yeah.
Well,
it just doesn't look good.
They are not.
He's a bit impatient, like you and I. He's a bit impatient, seeking to push the state, but he doesn't give what it takes to hurry in the manner he's asking.
No, but
so the court says, if you have anything, assist the state with it, rather than coming back to us and seeking to say, you got the judgment, so...
You see, Samson, if you take the legal route, I can understand that.
You're right.
But for the ordinary man, the expectation wasn't that when the MPP gets to power, it was Martin Amidu. Yes, certainly, absolutely. For the ordinary man, the expectation wasn't that when Martin Amidu when MPP gets to power, it will take another effort on the part of Martin Amidu to even get the money. You know, so today, if we now have to deploy these legalists and so on and so forth. So
it's not exactly the reality.
So I'm relating to you some of the factors that may have gotten people to have that reduced, you know, perception about the government's effort in the fight against corruption. The second point is, you know, the MPP promised, if you read page 53 or so of the MPP manifesto, that it will establish a mechanism to ensure automatic transfers of statutory funds such as the NHIS, the Common Fund, and so on and so forth, you know, directly to the agencies that must benefit from them. You ask yourself, is it happening? In fact, during the referendum debate, one of the strongest arguments of the yes voters was that it would ensure transparency and accountability down there. And in fact, when the president delivered his address to cancel it, he talked about the fact that one of the reasons was to ensure accountability at the local level. And you ask yourself, is it the case that there is no accountability there? Is it that the president is also acknowledging
we'll get there.
That there is no accountability
we'll get to
in
that
there?
Subject.
And so that certainly is another issue. The other point is, look, Ghanaians are concerned about contract prices and who the beneficiaries are of the contracts. So under NDC 2014, you would have, 83, 74% of the people saying, look, the government is not doing well, because we see party chairmen, party secretaries, constituency organizers, constituency chairmen being the beneficiaries of the contracts. And the contracts are being awarded at figures that we all know, we all build. A 6 classroom block should not cost us this amount of money. And yet it goes to the party chairman or party organizer, and this is the amount, and it's still happening.
So the question I ask again, why is the perception this high in a regime that has done quite a lot on paper? This reference you just made, we have done what we call beneficial ownership. So now our laws allow us to go behind to check who is that company you have given the contract to. Is it really that company without some politician behind it? All this is happening, and yet you have this rate of mistrust.
Well, the reason is what I was directly coming to, which is laws without implementation. And I think that this government, if there is one area we have to applaud it, is in the, getting us new laws. The Office of the Special Prosecutor law, difficult as it was navigated because there was this issue about whether the president can, appoint somebody like that, because the Constitution says the Attorney General has the power, and they were able to navigate it where the Attorney General would play a role in getting the person in place. The president will play a role.
Done in record time.
And so, yes, done in record time. And after it, we all applauded. When the president appointed Martin Amidu, we thought, look, this is just really going to be a massive thing. 2 years on, people are so disappointed that is that all that we were expecting? Is there
justification for that disappointment? Is it impatience?
Well, I don't think it is a matter of impatience. Yes, sometimes you can say, well, people must be patient. But 2 years on, what are we seeing? They are in court fighting 34,000.
The government has failed in this direction?
34,000 CDs. Because to the extent that Martin, for example, complains in terms of his setup, the resources he needs, the personnel he needs, why go through all these difficult processes of navigating to have the office established?
He was given only for 180 million.
Yeah. Well, but
he's been allotted money.
Kofi, allotment, as you know,
I'm not playing the No, it's important to get the issues right.
Okay. So you are saying, in your view, it has failed.
I mean, in my view and in my expectation, I don't see what I was expecting in terms of the Office of the Special Prosecutor, and in fact, even the deterrence that it would have
I beg you something, just a quick one.
Okay.
We are not seeing that.
Let me go to
if you let me just,
we are conflicting government and the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
No, but you see, we talk. What is government, Kofi? What is government?
That's why OSP is independent. It should even go after government.
No, but if we're talking about state institutions, are you saying that, for example, if Amidu? No. Are you saying that if Amidu by now, had succeeded in prosecuting some 10 people.
Nobody has stopped him.
I
have a problem with that because nobody has stopped him. I wish he would do more. You and I know how much we fought over this OSP. So please, it's clear.
No, the point is, if we're talking about the fight
you finish up in a minute,
corruption,
and let me go to
and now there are other reasons. For example, the current issue around the Auditor General. Who are the people, instigating this whole issues around the Auditor General? Either must go, must face prosecution, must face investigation, and so on and so forth. Something you know.
I don't know. I know about the suspicion. I don't know. I know about the suspicion.
Who petitioned Iyoko? Which media outlets, were being used, as a scheme to really front that whole agenda? We all know. And of course, I think that the phenomenon where
we know the petitioner, but we don't know him to belong to
in the previous periods where we would have an issue come up, and even before state agencies will complete their investigations.
Sorry, you know the petitioner to be in a party?
No, I'm saying if you're a party member, doesn't mean that you can't petition.
Right.
Yes,
no, absolutely.
When you look at
thank you.
No, I'm saying that. I'm saying that phenomenon where state institutions will be investigating a matter, and then the president comes out to pronounce, his view or verdict on it. So I'm just looking at what could be the possible issues.
In just a minute, the small bit of the part of the question I ask you, which for me is also important, is where you have as many as 61% of the respondents saying that they are scared, they are afraid to blow the whistle on corruption. Because if they did, there will be some retaliation or some form of attack, if you like, on them. What does that tell you of the situation?
You see, Samson, I think that if we put the analysis I'm making in context, I'm basically looking at what could have been the triggers, the factors that would have prompted people to have a different view of the government's effort in the fight against corruption. So I'm trying to just give you a number of things. You know, that,
no, I'm asking of your interpretation of that bit of the data, because I am thinking that everybody should feel bold that when they do this, they even have the support of the state.
In law.
Yes, they have the support of the state, but they are scared. They don't want to.
No, but they should. If you take
compare them to the perceived corruption in those institutions.
But they should. I mean,
it's very
let's
difficult.
take the example of our own colleague friend Manasseh, you know, who had taken it upon himself to do a lot of investigative issues around procurement, you know, and so on and so forth. He's had to go through a lot of troubles. As you know, the last time I met him, this about 1 week ago, but before then I knew he used to work with a policeman.
He still does.
He still does. I mean, why? Why so?
And he just finished with the procurement thing and disclosed.
Yes.
And brought the revelation that the man at the helm of procurement himself was procuring for himself.
Yes.
So he cannot be secured, really.
And Kofi was talking about Anas, you know, and the work he does, you know. It's public that I have issues, you know, with some of the methods that Anas has been deploying, you know, in recent times. But whatever it is, and my problem is positioning that as journalistic. If it was a different way of doing it and exposing what is being exposed, I have no problem. But whatever it is, you know, at the end of the day,
we knew that the state, by the promise of Akufo-Addo, he was going to collaborate with Anas. Elsewhere in the world, they use these guys to do what you call the agent provocateur. The state backs them, and then they bring the results.
Yes.
So why is that not happening?
Yes. Wow.
Why is it that instead, the level of the security he had is almost completely wiped off, and he has to be on his own to
that is the response
himself.
to why 6 out of 10 people would say, I fear retaliation, you know, if I dare report, you know, corruption in an institution or against someone. Because those who are doing it, people are witnessing. People are seeing what challenges they are going through.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm not surprised at all that you know, this will be the verdict of the people in terms of the perceptions they have when it comes to government's effort towards the fight against corruption.
Okay, thank you. So now let's go to Kweku Bako and hear your interpretation or appreciation of the Afrobarometer report. But I'd like to read this this quotation from Ken Ajiman Atefa's, you know, book, and the Attorney General quoted it this week.
Which one?
When corruption and the challenges of national development. He says that the cost of corruption is enormous, covering the loss of development funds, retardation of economic growth, flight of capital, and the inflation of administrative cost. Corruption also frequently results in loss of legitimacy. That's how dire it can be. And respect for legally constituted authority by, among other things, undermining the integrity of the socio-legal foundations of that authority. It debases the moral fiber of a society by nibbling away at the core values that bond the society together. Corruption is decidedly dysfunctional to the maintenance of a just social order. It is heavy damper on motivation. It stifles initiative and creativity, demoralizes the honest person, violates the individual's right to economic and social well-being. It nourishes mediocrity and undermines the merit system of rewards, appointments, and entitlements. Corruption generates incompetence by fostering the appointment of the proverbial square pegs in round holes. Corruption engenders market inefficiencies and fosters the deliberate creation of bottlenecks in the bureaucracy in order to further the ends of exploitation. In short, corruption is a hindrance to economic development and social advancement. Let's situate this in the report.
Yes, but we should clarify or clear certain issues. In terms of the ANAS principle, and I'm not sure if I was wrong, Kofi can quickly correct me, because I got the impression that the principle or the processes have not been tested in terms of its methods and things.
No, that's not what I meant. Rather, it's been tested, and the president said he will use it.
Yes, because some of the things he's done went to court and got vindicated.
Produced results, that's right.
Okay, what I was saying is that not all the evidence he's collected has been processed through court.
Okay. All right.
But some have.
Yes, some have.
Yes,
and,
okay.
and
So let's
for
hear,
instance, the
some
cocoa
have.
smuggling, the SEPS thing.
Yes.
There's a lot of
Went
it.
through.
So the principle is well established.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that clear. And then the Wyoming thing, I think we should just bring some clarity on the matter. Wyoming's case is virtually concluded. Indeed, December 2nd Daily Graphic, just a few days ago, there was an auction, a publication of his, to auction his properties. In a democracy, Wyoming capitalized on the democratic provisions that were available to him to fight consistently. We all saw it, even went beyond our boundaries. So July 2019, the Supreme Court gave a final ruling. So it wasn't as if somebody was sleeping on the job. The man was fighting. He's a fighter and using the law. And the law had to be used.
No, but you see, when you stand on a campaign platform and you give the people a sort of hope that you will do this in a certain rapid fashion and that there is inertia on the part of a particular regime because it is corrupt.
No.
And then when you come and you face the same bottlenecks,
you have no case.
The people have the right.
Something you have no case.
They are justified.
Let's say you have no case. Did they say they will use Gestapo methods to retrieve the money? We're going to apply military force to take the money? Nobody said that. Nobody said that. So
President Mahama had wished that.
He said so. He said that he would have, if he was a military leader, he would have retrieved the money just like that. But we know he didn't mean it. He was talking in a certain context.
That would have been wrong.
Yes. Okay. So processes have been done. And eventually the Supreme Court gave a final ruling based on which his properties have been auctioned. I'm saying 2nd December Daily Graphic. It's there.
Kuku, from where I sit, I can see the commendable efforts, legal processes. But I'm saying that when you stand on a political campaign platform and you tell the people that a government was somehow complicit and was not interested, and that you will do it like with the stroke of the pen once you come into office, and then you come into office and we have spent 3 years and you are still chasing it, you have not gotten a dime out of it.
You are looking
the people
at
are
you are
justified.
talking of the political angle. And
Exactly.
I'll tell you, when the politician says that he's not bothered about who caused the liability, who caused the liability, okay, he's interested. He's not interested in the beneficiary rather, but who caused the liability. Do you recall it?
President Mills.
Yes.
What did that mean? Straight away, it gave a perception that some attempt is being made to protect the beneficiary.
Okay, so can you proceed
through
to
the thing into a political
Can you proceed
orbit.
to Afrobarometer?
So no, but it's important we clear. So the way you make thing is
it's
also,
only a difference of opinion.
No.
And I think that
But
it's
something that
important.
also it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be for argument's sake.
Yes,
Because
and I think that
really,
it's
I don't
important
think.
we look at that in the
can-
context of, could that feed into a perception for somebody to think that, oh, this government or party is not doing well?
That's the question
And
I
that
asked.
is,
But we
and that
sitting
is
here,
where
if-
we are looking at
if
it
we are
from.
debating and analyzing, can we
have to go
demystify
beyond-
that?
So that's a legitimate position.
No, but can't it be demystified? When we sit here,
If we have facts.
are we supposed to just go
So
along?
proceed, Kuku.
I'm saying that is distinct also from the Waterville case, where there are also cross-border jurisdictional issues that have come on board. So let's draw that distinction. Right now, the controversy between Martin and the state, if you like, is relative to the Waterville matter.
That's right.
How to deal with the Waterville issue, not Wyoming. Wyoming is out of the way. That's the point I am making. Now, you see, Afrobarometer is a very credible institution in terms of its work. Its local branch that does the work, CDD, and I'm not saying it because Kojo is sitting here, it's a very credible agency. Their research surveys that they put out there, the findings are hugely credible in my candid opinion. We've had situations in this country where political parties and politicians, when the findings do not suit them, attack the integrity and credibility of both the Afrobarometer and the CDD. I'm beginning to see a certain new trend. The trend, and I think it's good for this country, where those who previously were seriously against these surveys are coming on board and accepting that it has integrity. Indeed, even the NPP that has had the habit of always embracing it with some reservations, at one stage actually had a problem. You remember President Kufuor, the 2005 version, had problems because he said there was no corruption in his government, whereas the survey was pointing to some corruption. And it became a huge issue. But I think gradually, there's a broad consensus coming that, look, let's accept these findings in good faith, based on their face value, and use it to re-engineer our society. I think that's good for us. I got this copy through this mentality of Kojo, not about a day or two ago, so I haven't bothered to do very serious analysis. But I'm not about for a moment to discount the validity of the findings here. Look, we've set up an office of, and when I say we, I don't mean, and I mean the state. Yes. I set up an office for special prosecutor. This Auditor General, you said is the best. I think he's the most activist that we have had. I prefer that description. His output is showing, fortunately based on the Supreme Court verdict relative to the Occupy Ghana thing. You check all his findings, it's good enough for us. Some investigations have been conducted, go to Parliament, cash for seat. We saw it in the open. Those who made allegations were given the opportunity to bring evidence. We all know what happened. The verdict went against the allegers. We saw a Ajako bribery allegation that was also done in the open. We saw A+ allegation against 2 deputy chiefs of staff. It was investigated by the CID. There were problems, some discrepancies. Some people petitioned the SHRAJ. SHRAJ investigations and findings vindicated the CID report. You know, we've had the Manasseh PPA thing, and Manasseh's problem, I don't think has something to do with the procurement investigation. It was a militia documentary. If I'm wrong, you can correct me.
Right. That's
yes,
right.
so that's different. The PPA boss has been asked to step aside. I think the case has been referred to SHRAJ. SHRAJ is...
OSP started the investigation on it.
Yeah,
they have been reporting to
The conflict of
OSP.
interest went to
I would
SHRAJ.
exactly, because of the law, because of the Supreme Court ruling relative to the Anani case. But it is ongoing. The boss thing was investigated. The interministerial committee report is out, not publicly. I have seen a copy. I think the most important thing that happened to that case was that boss itself set up an internal committee, and they investigated. The findings are adverse. It's from 2014 to 2018. Disaster. Now, the point really is this. In spite of all these things that I've mentioned, it is obvious that it's not sufficient to reverse the perception of corruption. It's obvious. What it means is that we need to do more than we are doing at this stage. So for me, what government ought to be doing is to take this report, study it, find the missing links. For instance, prosecutions, you see, you take the Office of Special Prosecutor. I think they've gone beyond the area where it's logistical constraints. Many of their logistical constraints have been addressed, as far as I know. So they've gone beyond that. I'm not too sure what is stopping the Office of the Special Prosecutor dealing with certain issues. Charles Bishop's case, for instance. the CID intruded. Some of us were opposed to that intrusion because the special prosecutor was already seized with it. Now, what is the status of that case? I cannot imagine, I cannot see anybody in government or in the state that can actually prevent the office of the special prosecutor from proceeding with that particular case. I cannot imagine. Honestly, I don't see any obstacle that will confront the office from dealing with that case. So perhaps in asking the question, instead of asking government, we have to be asking the office of the special prosecutor. And he has to be transparent and tell us that these are my difficulties. If the case has no merit...
Koku, what are you saying? The Afrobarometer survey results, is it your reality?
To a large extent, it reflects the reality, even though it's based on perception. But let's be honest. Look, go back from the 1999, and I brought most of them here. It's almost consistent. Yes. So there is something wrong.
That is my worry. That is,
yes.
that is what worries me the most.
It's like the Auditor General's reports. Look, I've been doing a study from 1965 to today. Sometimes it's word for word. What I changed is the quantum of the losses. There is a systemic failure. It goes beyond individual administrations. That does not purge individual administrations of the liability or responsibility. Because you are giving power to use to change, to reform. So when I say so, I'm not purging any administration, especially this one, because it is the one that is incumbent. So the focus ought to be on them. But there is something basically wrong with the kind of system we run.
Yeah.
I mean,
structurally. But has this administration lived up to its campaign promises in fighting corruption for you?
I didn't expect this administration to fulfill its campaign promise relative to corruption within a 4-year term. I didn't expect it.
Oh, but they were coming into office for 4 years. Is that not so?
No, but what I'm saying, no government can do that.
When you have voted, when you go to the elections, you are campaigning for 4 years.
You cannot eradicate corruption within 4 years in its totality. That's what I mean. I expect them to do something. I expect them to show signs that will build confidence.
But when they were promising, they wouldn't tell anybody that we are promising that if you give us 8 years, when they were looking for 4 years.
No, I didn't say that. If 8 years, you will not be successful. So that's the point I was making from a broad perspective. That's where Kufuor was coming from when he said corruption started from Adam. No, but he wasn't saying that.
But I doubt they promised they were going to eradicate corruption, and I doubt that is your answer.
Fight corruption.
It's about whether what they promised to do. You know,
but they can point to the legislative instruments,
that is where,
like the office creation of the office of special prosecutor. They can point to that. Indeed, perhaps if you go and check the budget, they will tell you that, look, we've increased financial outlay to the anti-corruption agencies, and if you are doing a comparative analysis, the increment is there as compared to previous ones. They'll point to these things. All these are efforts. Okay, the RTI bill, which is an act now, yet to be operationalized. They'll point to that. But I'm saying that all this put together, clearly, against the backdrop of the survey, shows that they are insufficient relative to enforcement, prosecution. We should all admit that. I'm not in government, but the government should be the first to admit that this is a wake-up call, that perhaps we haven't been doing sufficiently enough to deal with the canker. That's the point, the approach they should take, rather than dismiss the whole thing outright.
No, I don't think they have done so.
No, I'm not saying this government.
If you check the information ministry, they seem to have the template they are following. When reports come out, they are not in a hurry to rubbish them. They accept and then they point out what they think is not correct.
That has been the character of the NPP, whether in government or opposition, except with that one I gave, the one Kufuor
I think
had
now
an encounter.
More consistent than before.
Yes, but that's the point I'm making. So when I made that point about don't dismiss, I wasn't referring particularly to this administration or what they have said relative to this. I was making the general case that our attitude as a people and as a government should be to accept this survey and its findings in good faith and work to address the issues.
And something I just wanted to add that, I mean, the point that Kwesi made, Kokubaku made about the systemic problem that we have. Because you see, anybody that does research, when you see this trend, it's it doesn't move.
It doesn't move. It's
I
worrying.
mean, once you have stagnation, you have reversal.
We are in trouble
at some point.
Very serious.
And one of the things, and everybody can admit here, that it is normalizing.
That's what I'm saying.
People see,
there's a cultural
people are
appreciation.
getting immune.
That's very dangerous.
They are getting
It's
immune.
normalizing.
Yeah,
Immune
yes. Corruption is the norm.
to the violence of corruption, right? Because they stop the connections, you know, as you're saying, the word offense and, you know.
Yes.
Okay,
So we should start dealing with that.
we'll take a break and I come back to ask you briefly about what we can do to avoid the dangerous normalization. You know, looked against the background of Professor Tefe's, you know,
Yes.
quotation
very
that I
apt-
read to you.
Apt description.
This is serious. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And for those of you having challenges with our normal YouTube stream, the show is streaming live on the Multi TV World page on YouTube. So you can watch from that page. And let's go to look at the issues, how we avoid normalization of corruption. But before that, just a couple of messages, and this one says that the present Attorney General has done a lot to retrieve the money from Wyoming. The retrieval processes are over. His assets are being sold. There was a publication in the Graphic, I am aware of that. It says that the Attorney General has fought off all the endeavors by Wyoming to conceal his assets, including securing a final ruling from the Supreme Court in July 2019 that UT Bank was in collusion with Wyoming. So that is a good point to note. And if you read the Graphic, the Wyoming's properties that were being auctioned, as initially when the ruling was given, we all read this. Number one, executive presidential property known as number 259, situated at Trasaco Valley, Phase 2, Ameri Court. The auction date is the 20th of December 2019. Executive presidential property, residential property, I say presidential, residential property known as number 260, situated at Trasaco Valley. So all of these are in Trasaco Valley. That will be auctioned on the 23rd of December. Residential property number 372/2 of the Kokan Crescent residential area, Pehe, Accra. Auction is the 31st of December. And the sale is ordered by the Deputy Sheriff of the General Jurisdiction. So that's just a bit of information as far as the Wyoming matter.
Covered by Lands Commission, and they'll also be sold.
Okay. That Ghanaians want to know a lot more about this, so they know that some progress is being going on. Samuel Bryan says that corruption is the enemy of development and of good governance. It must be gotten rid of. Both the government and the people at large must come together to achieve this national objective. And he's quoting Pratibha Patel. We of the NPP respect and acknowledge Afrobarometer's findings. We accept it in good faith. As much as it doesn't smear dark bitumen on us, as much as you will have your listeners and viewers believe, it is a call that has, some grammar situation. I need to take time and read it and correct before I can share. All right, so this one from Dr. Atu Edu in Evans, Georgia. He says a fixation on police corruption in Ghana is a bit contradictory, and I am relieved. It is only based on a perception. The fight against corruption in Ghana remains a background noise that is not dislodging the louder workings of politicians. We need to fry the bigger fishes and scrutinize the dichotomous consciousness of real corruptibles in Ghana. The right picture of corruption in Ghana is opaque. So we got to do something about that. Thank you for that. And then someone too is asking, in regard to the bust dirty oil deal, what have they done about the committee findings that were instituted? Among others, the committee found that and recommended a thorough investigation into the sale of slop between 2014 and 2017 to ensure clean products were not illegitimately downgraded as slop and sold at a loss to bust. And the Ghana Revenue Authority, whose petroleum taxes were foregone. The committee estimated that about 1.52 million Ghana cedis may have been lost to bust. This is Appendix L of the report that was issued. Just they ask the government to take immediate steps to surcharge Mevimpina or the transporters of the returned off-pec products for the lost volume of 8 million plus. Recover payment for the 471,000 litres lifted from Mevimpina. The payment must not be the nominal value but must include the interest to ensure the economic value is retained and bust is not shortchanged. So all these were the recommendations, and what has happened? That's the question that this person is asking. The committee concluded that clean products may have been deliberately downgraded and sold as slop or off-spec. This, the committee believes, borders on criminality and may have willfully led to a major loss to bust and to the state in the form of petroleum taxes. The question is, what has been done about that? Okay, so quickly, I should finish with Dr. Kuja Asante. So let me start with all of you, starting with Sulemana. So what shall we do to avoid this danger of normalization of corruption in our society?
Well, I think there is just...
And we know that much of the corruption is grant political corruption, really.
I think that it's just doing what has to be done, which is that people who perpetrate corrupt practices are punished. If you take 2014, where 74% of the population, people were saying, 83% of the people were saying corruption has increased. And down to 2017, we have a new government. And in fact, the 2016 election was fought and won on corruption. And I don't think that it is just the 1 or 2 or so cases that are being prosecuted that would have caused people to have that high belief that corruption was increasing. And for me, until we begin to see people being punished, for example, a classical case, the Australian visa issue. So what? Investigations were conducted and concluded that nobody did it and that the people miraculously came by the visas.
The president has seen the investigation. We haven't seen it yet. Has seen the report. We haven't.
So the point is, so long as we continue to, certain cases, investigations concluded and, the report vindicates this and so on and so forth, until, another government comes in and then begins to make noise about the opposition, then the normalization would continue. And as I said,
comes into effect in 2020. Will you make an RTI request for this report?
I think for RTI, we are all, waiting for January 2020 to come. I think there are so many cases, so many issues that people are already lining up,
right?
In terms of the demands that will be made. And I guess the courts are going to be busier, and the lawyers are going to be really, really busy, because it is one law that I hope.
Hopefully pro bono.
Okay, it is one piece of law that I hope, if well implemented, can result in a significant leapfrog in the fight against corruption that we've all been struggling to deal with.
Great. Yes, Kofi?
Right. I'll start from the Wyoming case.
Avoiding the danger of normalization of corruption. All of you said it is normalized.
Yes.
That for me and for our viewers and listeners is bad. We shouldn't get to that.
Yeah. General principle should be we should take steps to institute a morbid fear of corruption across this country. The question is how to do that. And that's why I'm saying I'm going to start from the Wyoming case. Why would I start from the Wyoming case? Because this thing seized the nation for years. It was a major reason why this government came into power and was one of the main drivers of the expectation. Now, if my senior Godfred has gone this far and done all these things, I'm saying again, Wyoming has almost been forgotten. Given how important it is to the perception, to whatever it is, honestly, there are bigger problems in corruption than the 51 million of Wyoming. But Wyoming has this public, face. There is no reason why...
It was a winning election campaign mantra.
There is no reason why they haven't held a press conference to update this country in detail about how Wyoming fought and how they fought him back to the point where now there's a list, and it's about the December 20th or so that they're going to do the auction. It should be a national spectacle.
23rd, and 31st.
So, Senior Godfred, do a press conference and explain where you've got into, because he's really fought hard. Okay, it's not done yet. They are unearthing more, all right?
At each stage, the media has reported what is going on. So why should he be doing a press conference?
But I'm telling you that it is not hitting the right notes.
Okay.
So that's better. Now, what do we do? How do we make sure there's a morbid fear? Let me tell you something. When Anas did his work, the things that he did, I have a few judge friends, and because of what we do, people know I know Anas. One of the judges called me and said, "Me pao chow, catch and demon yet bill." Tree.
Yeah.
Meaning, I beg you, tell your friend you should never do this thing again, because it's totally disorganized, basically created a lot of fear amongst the judges. Now, I'm not saying there should be such fear and whatever, but it is not a bad thing.
Are you saying what Anas reported is not going on still?
It is.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying,
at that
I'm
time,
saying that's why I'm
cease,
using this, and the person who told me knows himself. He called me and said, "I beg you, tell him not to do this thing again." And it was because it is making them so scared of touching anything that looks like corruption. And I agree with the president when he says you use the Anas principle. The Anas principle is equal to using sting operations and undercover operations. It is useful in every developed country. They do it. I don't have the time to give you examples from the states, etc. But look at this. If, and whether it's customs or it's GFA or whatever, wherever Anas goes, when he does his job, there is this change of atmosphere. And people are not sure who is Anas and who is not. And I'm thinking
it's the same Anas that some people are trying very hard to bring down with,
which is where I'm going next. So
things
first,
that clearly appear not to stick.
So first, please, the president must act on the Anas principle. We have YOKU, we have the OSP, we have other institutions, including the Police Criminal Investigation Department, use these things and use other things so that there will be this fear of corruption in the system. Then, stop attacking Anas. And when I say stop attacking Anas, I don't mean the government is attacking Anas, but there must be overt support for his work. Look, I know about the many problems surrounding the person and the accusations and the other things. And there are some of them have come to me even as a lawyer.
He doesn't have the support he used to have.
He doesn't have the support. And I'm not saying Anas is perfect, but I'm saying he's a net positive to this country. He's done more good than bad. And I know some of my friends who say, oh, this and that. We need to look at the bigger picture. And if we need to do something about, refining some aspects, that's fine. But the point is, we must see Anas as a net positive. And if we have to do something about, dealing with some of the issues around him, let's do it. But we will not deal with the perception of corruption, nor deal with corruption if we attack people like Anas and Manasseh. We must be seen to be fighting corruption.
But
one of the most
but like you said, they are human. When they make mistakes, we should also take them on.
We should take them on and help them
taking
around.
them on means fighting them, why not?
Not fighting them in terms of what they do. Of course, the police are there. We say the police are the most corrupt. We haven't gotten rid of the whole police. We are working to, refine it.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Yes, what were you saying?
No, I was saying that I'm wondering whether we are saying that the corruption problem is the lack of capacity of our state investigative bodies to do their job. It is not it. It is the willingness to act
commitment, yes.
and to punish.
But the lack of capacity is also the human resource. I just mentioned to you that IOCO requires 832 personnel to operate, and it currently has only 374.
But what are
do
they
that.
doing with the 374?
They have used that to investigate investigate about 2 million cases, retrieved a lot of money to the state.
Well,
perhaps maybe they are also not blowing their trumpet, so you don't hear about it. So let's get to Kaku and then finish up with how do we end this normalization committee in corruption?
Well, the normalization has been with us for a long time. I'm sure it's getting worse, but it has been here for a very long time. We should encourage, look, this particular Auditor General, his activist spirit, I love it. And I think that we should encourage him to stay focused on his business, his mandate rather, and pursue the line that he's pursuing.
He's suffering the political thing too. People are saying he's NDC, and yet that's an NDC man, if you like, who has investigated NDC people that he's not obliged by law to investigate.
That's why I say you should stay focused. You should ignore those ugly noises. He's in court. We are hoping that court will settle that matter quickly.
Right.
There's another case at the Supreme Court. I'm hoping that too can be settled quickly so that he gets the space to focus and then deal with this disallowance and surcharges thing proper. You should multiply the effect of those things. Okay? Government should also make public the Australia visa report. I have seen it. I think some newspapers publish excerpts. I've seen the full report. The deputy minister, who usually is the focus, was purged of any liability or culpability based on evidence. But there were others who were mentioned and are being, there's a docket being prepared on them. Indeed, there's also an angle, some, you lawyers call it, some cooperation between Ghana and Australia. There's a mutual legal assistance. So the CID has written to the Australians, and the Australians are giving some, are cooperating. I haven't checked if the final document has come, but some names have been listed, and they've cited them. They've indicated that those people should be charged and prosecuted for their involvement in that visa thing.
And they don't include any of the guys at the top.
There's no politician in there. And because, again, you have to check how those things are done.
And that feeds into the mistrust of the people of the processes.
That's why I say if you make the report available, then we can come and sit here and scrutinize it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That's the problem.
Yes.
Because people will know that these guys low down there will take instructions and do things. And then in the end, they are the ones who suffer. And the people at the top, nobody. I'm just saying that's the perception that feeds into.
I agree. I agree with you, but you cannot send a case of suspicion or speculation to the court.
That's right.
For prosecution. You can't. So when the report is made public, we can scrutinize it and see whether it's fair or not. Boss 2, the report, is a very bulky one. I've seen it. That too must be made public. Okay.
But the steps that they asked to be done, do you know if anything has happened?
I don't know. I haven't checked. But you see, when the report is made public, it constitutes a certain pressure on.
And helps the perception.
And helps the perception. That's right. So they should make that public, you know.
All right.
The Office of Special Prosecutor, you know, he's like the Auditor General. They got a spirit.
Yeah.
Those were the right people to put where they were put. I think that our friend Martin should begin, first of all, he should tell us the cases he's investigating.
Right.
Which are the cases? Their status.
People are saying he's chasing Ayarga over peanuts when there's a lot of. There is a BCU matter brought to him with evidence. He's not following it.
I won't go to that extreme. If you still one person of the state, does that?
But no.
Does that leave
there
you
are,
out? Yes.
Not everything is the same. There are big problems. Don't go for
but
the
I'm saying
things.
that I won't do that. What I'm saying is that he should give us a list of the cases he's investigating, where the cases have reached, and then he should do some work. I have patience with that office. It's a new entity. We created it for a purpose. If you read the memorandum and all those things that came in, there's a reason why that came in. And it's not an agency that will die tomorrow. So I have faith in the long-term capability of that office, regardless of who will be manning the office.
And in fact, what you have asked, what you have demanded from the OSP is a mandatory requirement of the law. He must keep the people updated.
That's right. He did his first one, his first release.
Okay, but he should also be explaining to the public, because we understand somewhat that all the money we got to know, 180 million, is that so? That was allocated to him. He never accessed a dime. So if he's complaining, if you didn't access it, why are you complaining? Yes. So how do we move away from the normalization?
Well, let me start with where Kofi ended about signaling. Actually, in one of the Afrobarometer, I think it's around 7th Afrobarometer, we asked, what should we do to the money we recover from? And one of the very interesting, and it was a popular one, a very interesting proposal, was that we use it to build, social amenities and like schools and hospitals, and we should write on it that this money was paid by money recovered from stolen money recovered from social. So, people want that. It has to be a deterrence, a cultural deterrence, because they said that they didn't want only the person, to suffer the shame, but his family has to suffer the shame. So if you know that that is going to happen to you, you think twice about going to engage in corruption.
Maybe a bit of that is what Yoko has started. When they are going to confiscate your assets and they have a problem with it, they come, instead of putting the court order on the building, they graffiti the order on it.
Because in Nigeria, the EFCC does that, very, it's a huge, all over the place. So for me, the signaling is very important. And then the ANAS principle. When we did our stand against corruption last year during the anti-corruption week, we sent the letter that we sent to the president. We proposed that he should just 6 months deploy, whether it's BNI, Yoko, undercover agents, just to hospitals, your big hospital, Kolebu, whatever, schools, whatever, and get people extorting money from poor people who cannot even afford the services. And you'll be doing that, you just sample places so that people don't really know that it's going to happen to you. And begin to just build a psyche. Because one of the other things that we have to do is to really just transparently share information about fees and things at public services. Because that also helps people use that to extort. But we thought that even if you did it for 6 months, as a baseline, of signaling to people that it's not business as usual, you are going to begin to make a difference in terms of how people behave. Because that petty corruption also feeds into the perception that nothing has changed. So we proposed that. It's not been done. We proposed it to Madam Maud when even she was Attorney General. So for me, that signal is important. Then the other thing is when you are dealing with something that is so pervasive, you almost have to go back to the core issues of values, integrity, and character. Because as Professor Tifa was saying, it nibbles at the core value. You begin to see wrong as right. And you can't even make the difference anymore. So as the money comes to you, when you are taking it today, you're taking it tomorrow, you just feel like, and these days, you can even describe it.
Facilitation is no longer
you can describe it as a blessing. If you had gone to church the day before, you can say, well, this is an opportunity, was prophesied, that you will get this opportunity, and you've gotten it. When you get to that point, it is a very, very dangerous state. We are talking about terrorism at our door. If you can bribe a police officer 10 cedis and get away with a cargo full of guns, you just imagine what will happen if we get in this thing. So those things are critical. I just want to use the opportunity to make some correction. For us, it's about the state and the kind of society we want to build. So when these perception stuff come and these corruption discussions, one government, yes, you have to hold the government responsible. But if nothing is changing in terms of correcting the system, then we are in problem. And that's why I want to, this 9.6 billion thing that has been banded around, when we release this report, I just want to put it in context. So basically, we were talking about asset recovery. we did a documentary where we were trying to show the importance. Corruption Watch did a documentary about asset recovery, and we're trying to show the importance of asset recovery. That we can do all of this, even people don't see that we recover the money, it will not be a deterrent. Because what do people steal the money to go and do? They want to go and spend it on things. So if you recover the money, you begin to create a deterrence. And we said that based on the cases that we have been doing on Corruption Watch alone, the amounts of the volume of money that has been banded around as monies that could be lost to Ghana, it was 9.6 billion. And this includes cases like the medical stores, NCA matters, the even the disallowances.
All right.
Right. But then, so we can play the politics, but the point is that corruption is an existential threat.
Okay. Thank
to
you.
Our nation, and we have to address it.
Thank you very much, Kwekubako Jr., Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, Kofi Bento, Suleiman Ibrahima. We will take a break and return to ask the question, what did the president do wrong in announcing the abortion of the referendum? Then this last text message I read says something, the design of our democracy makes corruption practically a necessity for the facilitation and viability of partisan politics.
Wow.
Party funding and the exclusion of politicians from the broader economy when not in power makes corruption a logical consequence. How many businesses will rehire past MP or minister whose government is out of power? Senyor Hosi sent in that one. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's the most authoritative news analysis platform. And we have got to the subjects that got me to bring my constitution to the studio. All right, so that the necessary references, when need be, will be made. So before we go and hear the president, Kwame Esiedusapon says, corruption in our country is a matter of optics. This optics feeds perception. If you know how much a public office holder is paid and realize that in no time their lifestyle has changed, perceiving corruption is not rocket science. Let's hear President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo speak on aborting the referendum.
I thought and still think that such reforms should be based on a broad national consensus. It was in furtherance of this and other matters that on Tuesday, 18th April 2017, a little over 4 months into my mandate, I held a meeting with my three predecessors, the first, second, and fourth presidents of the Fourth Republic, Their Excellencies Jerry John Rawlings, John Ajekum Kufuor, and John Dramani Mahama, at Jubilee House, to seek their views and counsel on these issues. I came away from that meeting with the view that there was consensus amongst us that the time had come for political parties to participate openly in district assembly elections and local governance. Indeed, amongst the leadership of Parliament and amongst members of Parliament on both sides, and amongst virtually all stakeholders who had been consulted either by me or by the Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, the clear indications were that there was a broad national consensus for the repeal of Article 53. Regrettably, 2 weeks ago, the main opposition party, the National Democratic Congress, made what I can only describe as a U-turn and stated that it was no longer prepared to go along with the national consensus.
Right, so that's the president in that broadcast to the state, the nation, and that was it on Sunday? Yeah. Okay, right. Where do we start from? Yeah, Kweku. So people have faulted the president. I've seen you have some things you have highlighted. So tell us what you think. Shouldn't he have allowed us to go vote If he was afraid of no, we vote no.
I know you don't mean it. Because
Yeah.
see, I've read some elsewhere. Oh, you see the kids playing.
They're in a hurry. They want you to come in quick.
There's video games. And
Okay.
it pops up. I've been trying to even
All right.
delete it, and I'm unable to do
Yeah.
it. No, I'm so
Bomb
technically
before
backward.
Yeah, I get it.
Say it again. I'm sure the focus now is on whether the president had the mandate or the
Yes.
constitutional.
Yeah, there are some who have raised that issue.
No. See, I was one of those who advocated for the abandonment of this project in the wake of the NDC's U10. And my position was based on the fact that this kind of exercises, particularly when you seek to amend an entrenched provision of the Constitution, we all know the requirements, the 40% turnout, and out of the 40%, you should have a 75%
Voting yes.
Voting yes. And you had a situation where the principal stakeholders, in terms of political parties, understanding this, agreeing that they would build a consensus and go for the yes. Other stakeholders that were consulted all were going in the same direction. And I've seen a lot of documentation to show from 2017 to 2019 the kind of interactions and things that went on and the commitments that were made relative to let's campaign for yes. The very moment that path was broken, in my view, it was worthless going because there was no way we were going to achieve the yes for the thing to be removed. And I've heard people say that, oh, that is like playing football when we're kids, and when things aren't going your way, you take the ball, say, match me ball. It's a comical interpretation of a very serious issue, in my candid opinion.
Okay.
It's allowed some comic relief, but that's not what the issue was. The issue is what I've just told you. But does the president have the right or the mandate? I'm not a lawyer. You are lawyers. I've tried to interrogate the issue and seek some education from some lawyers and even judges, especially retired judges.
Yeah, and briefly, what do they tell you?
And I was referred to the fact that this is a bill. As we speak, it was still a bill.
Right.
Before the referendum, it remained a bill.
That's correct.
I've read Mr. Stephen Kweku Asari's views. I saw a banter between him and Kofi Bento.
Right.
And I realized that he's brought in the element of the constitutional instrument, 120.
Yeah.
And he's hinging on that. But I'm still educated, informed by some of these authorities that I've spoken to. That
So the constitutional instrument you refer to is the constitutional instrument that was passed empowering the Electoral Commission to take the bill to
a
referendum.
yes.
All right.
And until the referendum is held, the bill remains a bill.
Yes.
Right.
And it's before Parliament.
Sure.
That's right.
And I'm told that I was asked to check Article 297
Right.
of the Constitution, implied power, etc. The C, it says where a power is given to a person or authority to do or enforce the doing of an act or a thing, all such powers shall be deemed to be also given as are necessary to enable that person or authority to do or enforce the thing, the doing of the act or thing. D, where a power is conferred to make any constitutional or statutory instrument, regulation or rule, or pass any resolution or give any direction, the power shall be construed as including the power exercisable in the same manner to amend or to revoke the constitutional or statutory instrument, regulation, rules, or resolution, or as direction as the case may be. The education I got is to the effect that since the thing is a bill and is still before Parliament and the referendum hadn't happened, under Standing Order 132, what the Attorney General did based on the instructions from the President was in order, nothing unconstitutional.
Okay.
If you go to the 297 that I've read, it shows that somebody who has been given the power to exercise discretion actually impliedly has the power to undo what he may have done.
That is when the law donating that power to you to do the thing has not circumscribed how you should undo it.
Yes.
If the law tells you appoint a judge,
Yes.
then says after you appointed the judge, you cannot dismiss that judge unless you go through this process. You must follow that process.
I agree.
But if it doesn't provide how to dismiss the judge, then the power to appoint the judge includes an implied power to disappoint that judge.
If the referendum had occurred, there is no way this bill could have been redrawn.
Right.
That's all.
Okay.
So for me, based on this education that I've had, and I'm saying from lawyers as well as judges, particularly retired judges, some of who sat on the Supreme Court and ruled on very serious matters, I think I'm inclined to go along with those who think the president has not committed an unconstitutionality.
They just directed you to read a provision of the Constitution by your own reading of it. Is it,
And no lawyer
is
reading.
it, is
It's
it
clear.
enough for you?
Yes, I think there's,
The lawyer.
I think the president is right. But you see, bottom line, maybe we should go to the Supreme Court.
I think so.
It helps.
Okay.
That's the
I
way to
think
grow
so.
our
I think
democracy.
so.
Yeah.
Go to Supreme Court.
So
what
let's
is
come to Kojo, who thinks that
yeah.
there's even a possibility of somebody going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
to
no,
do
I-
what? What are they going to
They
say?
are hinted.
No,
The Hansard.
seriously. I mean,
Hinted
so
that
I
they could
share
be.
Kwekwa's concerns because I think that once the process. So if you take the normal bill in Parliament, right? The Parliament is in full control of the bill, from beginning to end. This introduces this kind of step that goes out to the people, all right? So the referendum process through the CI now takes it out and gives it to another institution, which is the Electoral Commission, to undertake this process. Then it comes back to Parliament. Right? Now, if you take a purposive interpretation of it, right, at that point in time, you have set in motion certain actions, which are obviously consistent with what a referendum should be, which is you want to ask the people a question. You are expended all kinds of resources to undertake this process. If you have a power to just curtail it at any point, like any other bill, which has not become actionable yet, right? A normal bill will not become actionable until it has become assented to by the president. And if there isn't going to be any expenditure or anything, it will be based on when that bill has become an act. This doesn't have that same structure. It stops the parliamentary process at some point, takes it out from Parliament to give it to another state institution to conduct the referendum, and when the people decide, then it comes back for Parliament to amend that particular provision.
So this is your focus. Article 290, Clause 4, which says, after the bill has been read the first time in Parliament, it shall not be proceeded with further. First time reading. It shall not be proceeded with further unless it has been submitted to a referendum held throughout Ghana. And at least 40% of the persons entitled to vote voted at the referendum, and at least 75% of the persons who voted cast their votes in favor of the passing of the bill. So you are saying that when it says, after they've done the first reading,
That's right.
it leaves their hands.
It leaves their hands.
And they cannot do anything about it again unless it has gone to a referendum and come back.
That's right. Which is very different from where...
Who is the sponsor of the bill?
So the sponsor, based on our current constitution, it's still an interpretation issue, because even the speaker now is talking about private members.
No. Who is the sponsor of this bill?
Clear.
The bill for the
This is
amendment
clear.
of 55.3, who is the sponsor?
It's the executive.
It's the executive. So it's a bill, it's not a law.
Sure.
No, I mean every law goes.
Okay. When you introduce a bill in Parliament, are you able to go take it back and revoke it?
Yes, but that's what I'm saying, is that is the difference. See, that's why this article lays a different procedure for this type of bill. In the standing orders, they don't make a distinction between this referendum process and ordinary bills. So that's what I'm saying. I understand
because
based
there's
on
no
the strict.
distinction.
No, but it's a distinction.
No.
There is a
wait, I'll
distinction.
come to you,
There's a distinction. So that's what I'm saying, that if you take by just
You are calling this a
normal
special bill. The
interpretation.
Constitution
No,
doesn't call it a
exactly.
special
And
bill.
standing
No,
orders
that's
don't
fine.
do that too.
Yeah.
That's the standing orders.
They
don't
have
do
the
that.
Right.
urgent bills, but that one is passing
Yeah,
under
that's a
certificate.
certificate of
So
urgency.
there's
Right.
no serious distinction.
What I'm saying is that for me, if I do a purposive interpretation, that's just the policy implications of what you are doing. Because if you create that kind of process, right, you just imagine the cost to the state, where you can truncate, right, a referendum process, which has left Parliament, gone out, people have spent, they are setting up to go and do the referendum, and you can curtail it at any point in time. This might not be the first referendum we're going to have. You cannot create a system where you deliberately waste public resources that way.
So you're talking of two things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a purposive. That's what I'm saying. It's a purposive.
What do you mean by a referendum process which has left Parliament when it is the bill that the CI is passed for the EC to implement? In the absence of the bill, what are they to implement?
Yeah, but this is what. So what I'm saying is that if you take a normal bill from first reading to second reading, third reading, and assent, it does not trigger any kind of public expenditure, with a referendum. It does not trigger any kind of, actions, the kind of actions that a referendum triggers. It will go through the process, through the debates and all of that, and it becomes an act.
Okay.
After it is passed, LTI. But this one, it stops, and then it says go and do certain acts, and then it comes back.
The act, it says go and do, it doesn't mandate you. If you check the language, it says shall, at each point shall. When it gets to this point, it doesn't use shall anymore. Does that also inform you about
the acts, the CI?
The process in going for the referendum, from clauses 2 going, it uses shall, and then when it gets to 4, where it should be put before a referendum, it refuses to use the word shall.
So what are you saying, that it's discretionary whether you put a referendum or not?
I'm asking,
then why would
what
there
do
be
you
a
think?
referendum bill? I don't think that.
Because it's entrenched.
A referendum is different because, and why it remains an entrenched clause, is that the representatives of the people, like 243 for instance, can represent the people, debate and agree on laws. But the referendum is different. Why? Because they want the individual, ordinary citizen to have a say.
Yeah, but the referendum doesn't necessarily amend the law. It's Parliament that does that after the referendum.
I agree. That's why I'm saying that if you take, how do you say, a face value, what's the interpretation? Just the reading of it. I completely, what you have said is consistent. Even the standing orders, Parliament's rules will be consistent with it. What I'm saying is that it does not make sense to me from a purposive interpretation.
That's what the Supreme Court
that if that is the case, then it means that you have created a situation where you can basically go and spend all kinds of resources on organizing a referendum, and it can be truncated at any point in time. That cannot be, from a policy perspective, useful. Can you say this kind of bill should be handled differently? That once you trigger a certain action, you cannot go back to it, right? Depending on whether you are the sponsor or it's a private member sponsoring the bill or not. If you pose a question.
Is there anything in law that you know that once you commence, you cannot undo?
There's no such law.
Well, I don't have any particular law, but if you are thinking that I only will take this action if
it favors me.
No. Okay. If you are thinking that I will only take this action because of the consequences of pulling back on the action, impacts, it's particularly from a cost point of view, that if you are not ready to do that, then you should not.
Okay.
If you cross the Rubicon, then
let me do quickly, and let's be brief about it. We have some 20 minutes to go. Yes, Kofi. Kofi, unlike Kwekubaku, Kwekubaku began from no and came to yes. and then came to abandonment.
No, not relative to the referendum. I was telling you
but
my
why
history.
Did you give, you give me
Wait,
the,
and then
you
no,
didn't
no,
describe
I was telling you my history.
Where I started
relative,
this
you are
matter.
yes. Yeah,
relative
yes.
to the referendum,
Right.
I had not expressed any point except
Okay.
to abandon it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I had a discussion with you. You were from a bit of a no, and then you
I
had
was
come to
telling
a
the
yes.
trajectory, my
Okay.
history from the I said 1999.
Okay. Right,
coming,
I
yes.
get that. Yeah. So Kofi is here. He was from a not too clear yes, and then eventually came to a no.
Hey.
Where do you stand?
Influenced by you.
Yes or no?
Mr.
I
No.
don't go there.
You
I
don't go
said
there.
On the
Yeah, so
merits of it.
did the president do anything wrong?
On the merits of the yes or no, I am sitting out that discussion. But the issue of whether the president's action
Okay, so you said yes or no is immaterial.
is immaterial, and I
Okay.
can explain that very well.
Okay.
But let's come to this issue.
Right.
We need to do a bit of education. Give me 1 minute for that. See, in a country governed by laws, you have the Constitution, which tells you or tells people what to do. And then you have laws, acts, that also tell people what to do. Now, when the Constitution tells you what to do, easy, you shall organize elections. Or it says, AMA, you shall make sure that the city is clean. It doesn't tell you how to do it. Now, so when you are an authority, or you are the EC, or you are a state institution or whatever, and you have a duty imposed either by the Constitution or by an act of parliament, you now, according to the Constitution, should go and set out processes and procedure so that it is not in the mind of the chief executive how he's going to do his work. You now publish what is called a legislative instrument if it is an act giving you the power, or if it's a constitution giving you the power like EC, you publish a constitutional instrument that tells everybody that this election we are going to go into, we will use photo ID cards. This election, you start from 6 and close at 8. You tell now how you will do what the law says you should do. So there's one thing, what to do. A law or an act, that is a constitution or an act, gives you that. How you will do it, you have to come and spell it out. Now, on this specific issue, it is about a referendum. The referendum only comes in because it is an entrenched provision, and therefore, in the normal situation where Parliament passes a law, a bill will go before Parliament. A bill is a draft law. It is not a law. Parliament will deliberate that bill and then make it into a law. The person who brings the bill owns the bill as long as it is a bill. But after it is passed as a law, it doesn't belong to that person again. It becomes an act of Parliament, and it is binding on everybody in the country. But when it comes to things that are entrenched in the Constitution, the deliberation of Parliament cannot happen only within Parliament. The Constitution says that Parliament, when you finish first reading or so, hold it. Go to the people and get them to approve this bill. Once they approve it, you don't even have any business deliberating it, just pass it. Okay? So in this particular case, Parliament has a bill, which is a draft. It is not a law. And the Constitution says, don't even discuss it too much. This is for the people to decide. Go to the people and ask. When they agree, you pass it. If they don't agree, you don't pass it. It's still not a law. At the point of a bill, like I said earlier, it still belongs to the person who proposed it. And the law in 297, the Constitution in Article 297 says, if you make a proposal that they should do this or that, and later you change your mind, you can come and take your thing and go away. Because at that point, it is still not a law. It is still not binding on the country. It is still a draft. It is still a proposal. Now, you have a situation where the president made an announcement and gave many reasons. And his reasons, they are there. But effectively, he said, I don't think we should go ahead with this exercise anymore. Originally, I actually made a post and said that the president giving us his reasons and making an announcement and etc. does not stop the process. Because essentially it is the expression of an opinion. But subsequently, you realize that if he had just left it at a TV announcement, then maybe would have gone ahead. But if he took proper steps to withdraw the bill from Parliament, then the what that we are trying to do is no longer there.
Exactly.
So if the what you are trying to do is no longer there, there is no point about the constitutional instrument. And I believe the president took those steps. So the question I ask those who say it is not correct is that what law stops the president from doing so?
Okay, so let me do this. Let's get Sule to speak briefly about it, and then I want you guys to answer the question: what next? What should happen? There have been statements, and people have made calls, and reading the one issued by the One Ghana movement, they said we can still go ahead with making MMDCs elective without 55(3) being amended at a referendum. So the president should commit to that if he really means business. The NDC accuses the president of not actually being committed to making MMDCs elective in this regard. Okay, so yes, Cyril, let's hear you.
Well,
and Kukuaza has a comment here I'll share with you.
I'm not a lawyer, just as Kwaku said, and so we get educated, and through the education we try to get our minds, settled on what our positions will be. From the conversation so far, and Kofi emphasized the fact that first reading is a bill. At the time it is going for referendum, it's a bill. I have a fundamental question therefore, because my understanding as a non-lawyer would be that, in fact, until Parliament approves it after the referendum and the president accents to it, it is not a law.
Absolutely.
Therefore, the question is, are we then saying that, in fact, when the referendum is even conducted, just after the referendum is conducted, ended, hasn't gone to Parliament, in fact, it remains a bill. The people have just made a decision on a bill, but it is not a law. At that point, can the president then say, look, I've talked about ABC, and since it's still, Parliament hasn't then acted on it yet, I haven't signed, it's still a bill, therefore I'm withdrawing. Because if we make that strong argument that it is a bill and the sponsor can withdraw, that is one question. The other question relates to my thinking around first reading. The Constitution says stop after first reading. You have no business to touch it until it goes out to the people for the people to decide.
It says unless.
Well, unless.
It's actually not until.
Well, unless. So in fact, unless it's even stronger. Unless it's even stronger. That once you do the first reading, leave it. And when you leave it, it tells you what to do. It doesn't say that leave it and then if there is any action, you can decide to touch it again. So leave it unless it goes out to the people. Here's the case, it hasn't gone out to the people, and Parliament goes back to act on that bill by the withdrawal.
Okay.
My other question is, I was reading as a non-lawyer, and my understanding was that, in fact, CIs, when we talk about the laws of Ghana, they include CIs. They include constitutional instruments.
A subsidiary law.
Yeah? So my understanding was that when we say the laws of Ghana, it includes constitutional instruments.
Sure.
And so for this referendum, there is a constitutional instrument. Therefore, that constitutional instrument, until the president said it must be withdrawn, the process must be truncated, was it part of our laws? If it was, are there processes for repealing, removing?
Address yourself to 297.
No.
So let me finish answering the question.
Yes,
Then we can answer
I think
are there
that
processes for repealing CIs?
Yes. Are there processes for repealing CIs? Would that process include the president going back to say, look, the whole thing that started and introduced this CI, I'm withdrawing it, and therefore this CI becomes null and void? I think that for these questions and my understanding of it, it would be great if this whole idea of going to the Supreme Court to seek interpretation so that it settles us. And in the future, no president would think or would say, okay, the thing has gone to a referendum. Oh, 2 days before the referendum is even held, I've changed my mind.
You think anybody will think that we would dare?
No,
that
it depends
after a referendum they will decide otherwise?
But I'm saying that in this case, what it means is that in fact 2 days before the referendum, the president could have could have truncated the process. In fact, a day before the referendum,
once
the president could have,
once it's
because we are
possible.
saying that once it's a bill, it can be done.
So do you find there is a problem with that way of looking at it?
I think so. I mean, as Kojo was saying,
Where you look at it to say that even after a referendum, a president has the discretion to.
But we should deal with that.
Because
Let's deal with
there
that.
is that
Okay.
emphasis that
Okay,
until it
just
becomes law,
Kofi, just a minute.
the sponsor can withdraw
Just
it.
a minute. And I want to ask about going forward. Yes, so
But-
just a minute.
So
Yeah.
let's deal with that. The referendum is a legal act. Once the referendum happens, you can't withdraw. Because if you read the law, and we don't have time, it shows that the referendum does not even give you opportunity to discuss the bill further. So you can go all the way to 10 minutes before the referendum. But once the people decide, the president decides.
that is where-
No, hold on.
You can
Look,
go 10
there's the
minutes to
nature of the law.
referendum and you abandon it.
No,
I don't
hold
think
on.
we-
You
I
are
think
saying
we
two
are
different
done.
things. Please.
You are inviting us.
You see, because of time, I'm a bit.
Because
But we are not.
talking-
You are worried
we
about.
talking legalese.
If 10 minutes to the referendum, there's force majeure, what happens?
Oh, well, but that one is even catered for in the Constitution, I suppose.
Okay.
So then we will resort to
it's
the
not created
Constitution
for.
again.
It's not created for in the
See,
Constitution.
you understand? No, the whole
The Constitution
thing
doesn't
about
create for
force majeure
everything.
Is-
It doesn't
is-
create
is-
for everything.
It's something
And
that is
that's why you may
legally
have heard me say
provided.
the law,
it's a good- I think
the law
it's a-
does not concern
for me, the
itself with
consequence of it-
trifles.
Does it?
But-
The second issue,
But-
how
but-
do you deal with a CI?
How do we move on? I think we should move on from here. We have just a couple of minutes to go.
The CI. Let's just
yes,
How do we-
yes,
see,
quickly,
yes.
quickly.
Let me explain. A CI, in a sense, is like an ally. Now, if the parent law, okay, is repealed, the CI or the ally dies with it.
No.
Like,
there is no parent
I
law
beg
in this
you.
instance.
Let me try and explain. You have what to do. We are going into a referendum. Now, the referendum has to be ordered in a certain way. The CI is supposed to order the referendum, how to do the referendum. If there is no referendum to be done, the CI dies. That's why I use the issue of the LI. If you have a law, the LI shows you how to operationalize the law. If the law is repealed, the LI dies. It's a chain effect.
It's a bill.
Yes.
No, a bill is a draft. It's not a law. A bill does not have
And the
legal
Constitution
force by
says
itself.
after
But you're
first
saying you're
reading
using
Parliament,
Madam
you
Law.
After first
cannot
reading,
touch
it is still a bill.
But you are
cannot-
using Kofi. You are using mother statute.
Okay, thank
which
you.
in this
Okay,
case
so
is
you
not
let's
a
move on.
law.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
how do you? how do
Okay,
you
yeah,
do
yeah,
that?
yeah. So, yeah, Kojo or the minority have suggested they may try.
There's no ambiguity.
Yeah. Okay, so
I think as for
so
that, I
what do we
think
do?
so.
Sule, let's do it this quickly this way, just a minute each. What should we do going forward?
Well, I think that for me, what the ordinary people want is that power to determine who becomes their chief executive. And that power, to grant that power does not require a referendum. It's just a parliamentary process. Unfortunately, the president, in truncating the referendum process, also decided that that process must also end.
Okay.
And I think that if indeed the president or the government is committed to giving power to the people as promised in the manifesto, because in the manifesto what is stated there is not that it will be done in a partisan way. It just says that it will be granted the people, it will grant the people the power.
Okay.
And so let the government
All
again
right.
sponsor 2431
Thank you.
for Parliament to approve it.
Thank
and
you,
then
thank you. Yes,
have it
Kofi,
done.
1 minute.
Article
1 minute.
55(3), it says that a political party is free to participate in shaping the political will of the people, to disseminate information on political ideas, social and economic programs of a national character, and sponsor candidates for elections to any public office other than to district assemblies, lower local government units. What it means is that political parties can do whatever and everything they want within the political space, but they should not be involved in lower and district or local level elections. If we go to elect DCs without putting your name on that particular candidate, nothing stops you from influencing them, from telling them what to do, etc. And why I said I was setting out this thing is that it is of no moment because we know they are involved anyway. The only thing is don't put your flag on that person. I think what we want is to elect DCs.
Yes.
It is not important whether they are of this party or of that party.
Can we
In any
can we
case,
elect them
we have-
without amending Article 55(3)?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
so
sure.
so we should go ahead with that project.
That's it. That's what we
Sure.
should focus on,
Okay.
and not the
All
political
right. So,
parties.
what do you say? There are those who are accusing the president and the government that we knew at the start that even though they promised this, the party didn't support the president. They didn't want MMDCs to be elective. So this was sort of a compromise they got with him that let's make it partisan. That is why, if they are not getting it to be partisan, then they will take their football from the pitch. What should happen?
No, seriously. So I think for me, we need to breathe some fresh air into this democracy. I feel all of the discussions, both 55.3 and 2431, basically was a trigger. It needs to open up the system.
Okay.
So I don't have a problem which one starts.
Okay.
I think we should elect DCs. I think even the Afrobarometer has shown there's popular support for it. We should elect MMDCs. That is going to really provide some energy.
So why did the president cancel the two?
Well, because it's almost like unilateral disarmament. You know, like you are passing a legislation where you are disqualifying yourself from participating. And as a sponsor, and particularly because 243 was just left with Parliament, then, you know, it's like...
So the NDC and others are writing, accusing the president that he's actually not really committed to making MMDCs elected.
Well, he will make the argument that he sees the two legislations linked. So as a sponsor, that's his perspective. And that's why he wants to pull it out, because he presented those two bills. So that's how he will present the case.
Okay.
But I think for the people, it's very clear that they want their mayors elected.
Right. Okay, yes, Koku.
What do you say? How do you go forward? What should the president be telling the NDC, who forced 55.3 to the front line? Check all the documentation.
We want to move forward.
I said check the documentation.
Yes, we have gone beyond that.
They actually forced it to become a
So we have gone beyond that. We are moving on. What should we do?
Project abandoned. Both sides. Case closed.
But we elect.
Why?
Listen, case closed.
Including the election.
Until further notice.
Including the election.
Yes.
That would be catastrophic. Look, the president should be commended for taking the
election
steps.
of MMDC.
Yes.
That's what you are talking about.
Yes.
Case closed.
We shouldn't elect
until
MMDCs.
further notice.
No way.
Court rise.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm sorry. That's all time will allow us.
This one does not heal the move towards electing MMDCs.
That's
all. Case closed.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. And those who think they are linked have not thought about implied exclusion in the law. This one from Koku Azan says that I did not think the referendum on Article 55.3 was necessary, and I consider its cancellation as a vote of confidence in non-partisan local election. While the cancellation may be justified on political grounds, the legal case for it is non-existence. Those who justify it on legal grounds do so arguing that a bill sponsor can withdraw it at any time. Presumably, these people would have no difficulty with cancelling the referendum on December 17 merely because the bill sponsor decides to withdraw the bill on that day. He's got a lot more to say, but unfortunately, this is all time will allow us. My guests have been Koku, editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, doctor, he's with CDD. Kofi Bentel is with Imani Africa. And Suleimana Brahima is with the Media Foundation for West Africa. Like we say, all together against corruption. Thank you very much for your time.
All together against corruption.
All together against corruption.